defendant Trump ordered to pay $83 million to the writer E Jean Carroll. She is the victorious plaintiff in this case. And right here you can see as she first walked out of court with her lawyers today. Now, we can tell you the jury deliberated for just under 3 hours. That is fast. And they dealt Trump a huge loss which sets records and shows a very costly miscalculation that he, an ongoing defendant, made by, according to the court system, lying and defaming her again after a previous court victory. Here are the numbers.
Hi, my name is Suri Crowe, and you're watching the MeidasTouch Network. Man, what an incredibly great day for justice on Friday. I believe sexual assault victims and survivors across the country breathed in a collective sigh of relief when a jury awarded E Jean Carroll a massive damages award in her second defamation suit against Donald Trump. Just what would it take to shut Donald Trump up from his nonstop lies and defamation of his established rape victim, E Jean Carroll? Well, according to this jury, a little over $83 million. Kaboom. We've known who Donald Trump is for decades. I mean, he told us what he does to women on that infamous Access Hollywood tape. He's bragged about his serial sexual predation.
You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy.
There it is. It's all out there. This is not a surprise nor a shocker. Long before E Jean Carroll ever took him to court, Donald Trump is a sexual predator. I mean, my God, have you heard him talk about his daughter? It's disgusting. Before he was elected in 2016, at least 26 women came forward with allegations that he had sexually violated them too. And yet his wife Melania said his behavior was just boys being boys. And apparently voters didn't give a rat's ass because millions of Americans voted for Donald Trump to hold one of the most powerful offices in the world. And my, oh my, have we been paying for that terrible decision. But this is hardly a new story. Women coming forward with their stories of sexual assault only to not be believed or taken seriously. Look at what happened to Professor Anita Hill when she testified before the Senate and the world in 1991 about how at that point Supreme Court Justice nominee Clarence Thomas had continuously and repeatedly sexually harassed her when she worked for him, of all places, at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the very agency that should have been looking out for her. Here's a clip from that testimony back in 1991.
He commented on what I was wearing in terms of whether it made me more or less sexually attractive. The incidents occurred in his inner office at the EEOC. One of the oddest episodes I remember was an occasion in which Thomas was drinking a Coke in his office. He got up from the table at which we were working, went over to his desk to get the Coke, looked at the can and asked, "Who has put pubic hair on my Coke?" On other occasions, he referred to the size of his own penis as being larger than normal, and he also spoke on some occasions of the pleasures he had given to women with oral sex. At this point, late 1982, I began to feel severe stress on the job. I began to be concerned that Clarence Thomas might take out his anger with me by degrading me or not giving me important assignments. I also thought that he might find an excuse for dismissing me. In January of 1983, I began looking for another job. I was handicapped because I feared that if he found out, he might make it difficult for me to find other employment, and I might be dismissed from the job I had.
Let me just say, for the non-women viewers or listeners out there, is that what Anita Hill described is what many, many women have endured in the workplace, in society, out and about. I know this from personal experience. When you're afraid to speak up about abuse going on in the workplace because you're terrified that your misogynistic boss will get rid of you or fire you or won't give you a good review. And that's what often happens in our backwards power dynamic. And for Miss Hill to bravely face the world and to talk about one of the most humiliating I'm sure, terrifying experiences for a woman to endure. And to speak not only as a woman, but as a Black woman is just the epitome of courage. And I just want to shout her out. And yet, 41 Republican senators and 11 Democrats did not take Professor Hill's dire warnings about this vile man, Clarence Thomas, seriously. And Thomas was narrowly confirmed by the Senate and elevated to the highest court in the land, where he remains today. He has been a sitting Supreme Court justice for decades, grifting the system, ignoring any even appearance of regard for ethics. He's ignored rules of disclosure. He's been flying around on Harlan Crow's jets, making rulings that are in direct conflict with his pro-insurrection lobbying wife, Ginny Thomas, and blatantly behaving as if he, a Supreme Court justice, is immune to the very laws that he lays down for everyone else. His open disdain for women was demonstrated in his decision to roll back Roe versus Wade, a 50-year precedent that gave women the choice to make their own decisions about reproductive health care. I mean, what a novel thought. Women having bodily autonomy. Because, of course, he believes, as do the other extremist justices on the bench, that women are, in fact, not equal to men. Over and over and over again, we get that message from the Republican agenda. The FBI under the Trump administration ignored thousands, I believe it was 5,000 tips, of credible tips from people accusing now Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh of sexually violating women. And there was the own brouhaha over his history of sexual abuse of women. The Bureau just never investigated Kavanaugh. And yet another man was elevated to a position of more power. So here you are, the former president who, according to a court, is a rapist and the likely Republican presidential candidate nominee for the second time in our history. What the hell? He proudly brags of his termination of Roe versus Wade, a ruling that, as we now know, decimated the lives of so many women and girls. In fact, this week, the Journal of the American Medical Association reported that since the Dobbs decision, vaginal rapes were associated with nearly 65,000 pregnancies in the 14 states that have total abortion bans. And it's important to mention the difference, because you can be raped in other ways aside from vaginally. So that those are just the rapes that were of that type that were, of course, associated with rape-related pregnancies. 59,000 of those occurred in states that don't have a rape exception. States like Texas, which continues to just blow us all away with their back-assward approach to everything. And Texas, by the way, leads the nation with 26,000 rape-associated pregnancies.
The type of Texas that the Republicans and Greg Abbott and Ted Cruz and Monica de la Cruz want us to have.
Monique Alcala is the executive director of the Texas Democratic Party.
We know people who experience rape don't always come forward. So we know that it's even worse than the 26,000.
I asked the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault if any substantive legislation has been introduced or passed since the ban began. In a statement, the organization said, quote, "We are profoundly disheartened that our state fails to afford a woman her fundamental right to make personal health care decisions, especially in the aftermath of a sexual assault."
So that's where we are with this Republican Party. A woman is violated, or a girl, we know it can be a child, violated in the worst possible way. And Republicans have decided to punish her by forcing her to bear her rapist child. And let's not forget, like I said, the thousands of children who are now forced into pregnancies because of sexual violence. It is the ultimate cruelty and violation of human rights. Just don't even at me. This is a black and white issue. And let me just share for the non-women out there, the threat of sexual violence is our Roman Empire. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the meme that was going around on TikTok about how often men think about the actual Roman Empire, which I guess I do too, because I'm a history buff. But apparently they think about it frequently, sometimes many times a day, etc., sometimes a few times during the week. Well, I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and through our conversation about our own collective fear of sexual violence, we were both like, she said, this is our Roman Empire. We are constantly, as women and girls, thinking, am I safe right now? Am I safe? How do I stay safe? It's constant, either on the subconscious or high-key conscious thoughts of, am I being watched? who's following me, make sure I keep my earbuds low lest somebody runs up behind me to attack me, check my six. Even as I'm walking my large dogs, like there are some nature reserves around here or whatever, I'm constantly head on a swivel. You know, I've got my defense mechanisms and I'm thinking, who's there? Who could come up and approach me? And I know that every female who's a driver knows that this terrifying feeling, quite frankly, of trying to find your car in a remote parking lot at night or even during the day, like just like abject fear, like I've got to get to my car. Just how can I avoid being assaulted here? Or that feeling of when you're alone on an elevator and a strange man gets in with you, like the hair goes back up on your neck. And the thing is that we're taught to be good girls. Oh, don't be so suspicious. Don't act like everyone's sus. Well, we have good reason to be, because sexual violence and misogyny is such a huge part of our culture worldwide. And it's what we live with. Hence, this is our Roman Empire. And instead of making things better, we're actually dragging women back in time, thanks to the MAGA Republicans. You know, the last time I reported on this issue, I read through the comments underneath the video, and I was really touched by how the number of comments from sexual assault survivors, those of you who bravely shared your stories, like it kind of brought me to tears, like just seeing how you guys were coming forward, maybe some for the first time, sharing stories of how you were sexually violated when you were a child, women, young girls, and yes, some men. So I just wanted to say that for those of you who have carried that heavy burden and that guilt and shame, no, that's not for you. And I hear you and I see you and my heart breaks for you. And there was one comment also from a woman she seemed to be irritated that I was referring to sex assault victims as survivors. Well, I've covered a lot of these stories throughout the years, and so I know the verbiage. But the other thing is, I'm a sexual violence survivor myself. So to me, survivor is a very empowering word. And I think that we need to take our power back from perpetrators. And it doesn't mean that we haven't been victimized. I'm not invalidating that. But taking our power back. Yeah, it did. It happened to me more than once, and by people whom I thought I could trust. I didn't report it to the police because even after being, I guess, educated and covering stories about sexual violence, I was like, the police aren't going to believe me. It's going to be my word versus theirs. And the really bad laws that we have across this country, state by state, that don't protect women or sex crime victims. So, I do know what it's like. And this is, I was reading some stories yesterday after the E Jean Carroll verdict came out or decision came out. And I could just see people kind of like when the Me Too movement happened, women feeling empowered and brave to share. And I thought, you know what, I can do that if that helps one person out there who's watching this. But the reality is that not a whole lot has changed in favor of us. I'm, again, very grateful that President Biden reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act that Trump let expire in his administration. But the truth is, getting law enforcement to even investigate or report sex crimes seriously is a whole thing. The shame and, quite frankly, shitty laws that we have for women and children. As I've said, I've reported on sex crimes for years. I've seen so many protective orders, which is the same thing as a restraining order, end up just being a piece of paper, as a violent sexual offender will ignore that piece of paper, and that the very women who are seeking protection from our laws and our legal system ended up being victims, and sadly, in many cases, murder victims. So we have a long way to go. We need to seriously enforce stalking laws where they exist and violent threats. And I mean, I could go on about this, but just for starters, we got to do better. We really do need to do better. And my God, this right-wing Supreme Court right now, they've already heard arguments regarding a case that would allow for violent domestic abusers to have access to firearms. So I can tell you that the most dangerous calls to show up on are domestic violence ones. Even police are like, whoa, because of the volatility. You add a firearm into that mix, a gun. So many times I showed up to scenes where the woman was killed, and often her children as well. So for the Supreme Court to think that the rights of a violent sex offender or a domestic violence abuser, that his rights should supersede those of the actual victims is abhorrent to me, and shows you how far gone this extremist Supreme Court is. I pray they don't make a ruling that these people should have access to their firearms back, but they've already been very pro-gun, and they haven't protected the victims of this country. So, I just say, what about the victims' rights? What about the survivors' rights? Like, how many more scenes do reporters and cops need to show up where she could have been saved if only the laws had done something to protect her? Oh, it just makes me so angry. And this is why I want to shine sunlight on this topic, because it's rampant. It's epidemic. Because we need to make it safe and totally acceptable for women and girls to feel comfortable coming forward to report sexual violence without the punitive judgment of a society that says, she shouldn't have been wearing that. Oh, you asked for it. Well, why were you walking home alone? Well, how many drinks did you have? I mean, my whole life. And this is the way that women are schooled. Just keep your head down. Or if it happened to you, it's your fault. It's so wrong. Oh my gosh. And now on top of that, we have this crazy MAGA cult attacking women for being independent and standing up and speaking. I mean, it happens to me daily on my social media areas. I get like so many MAGA trolls just saying horrible things. And so for E Jean Carroll, who went up on a national stage, she's repeated death threats, so many threats of sexual violence. And this is just wrong. We need to be empowering women, not further suppressing them. We need to vote for leaders with empathy who want to shift the power dynamic from the perpetrator to the survivor. No more enabling the Donald Trumps of the world. We need to remove statute of limitations on sex crime reporting. Often by the time a sex crime victim is able to even come to terms with what happened to him or her, it's too late and the statute of limitations has expired, particularly for victims of childhood sex crimes. They often will suppress that memory until years later. We need to make sure that if you have been a victim of a sex crime, that you can come forward and report it at any time and that there will be legal recourse for you. And my God, we need to make sure that Donald Trump never ever gets near the White House again. And we need to send a powerful message this November, not just in the presidential election, but in every race across the country, that we are standing up for women's rights. And we need to keep talking about it. That's why I'm so grateful to E Jean Carroll. She didn't back down. She stood up and she said, and I'm paraphrasing, that she was tired of being quiet. She said, I'm 80. Women have been told to be quiet for too long. She's done being quiet, and I am too. Why should we walk around with the shame and wear and tear of what a misogynistic, hateful culture has done to us? It really makes me so angry. We need to make sure that perpetrators of sex crimes and violent offenses understand that there will be consequences for violence against women. All right, to wrap it up, I am going to put a link, or I hope there will be a link in the description below this video, to the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, or RAIN is the acronym. In the description, it is a nonprofit. It is an organization that provides a wealth of information of support for all survivors of sexual assault. Each state has different sex crime laws, so you can go onto that website and learn what your options are. You can become educated and empowered to make decisions about what happened to you. And if you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual violence, oh my goodness, please come forward, talk to somebody about it, get the help that you deserve. It's never too late to take your power back. E Jean Carroll, boy, did she show us that. I'm so inspired. I'll start bawling. We've got this, you guys. Collectively, we can change the narrative in this nation. We can do it. But we got to stand up together and get out of that closet of shame for things that were not our fault, all right? My name is Suri Crowe, and you are listening to the MeidasTouch Network. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope to see you back here very soon, and I wish you peace.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.
Oh shit, it was 17.